Hey guys, how you going? Welcome to the Positive Experience podcast, where we look at the good, the bad and the ugly in living your best life. Today's segment is called In the Trenches, where we look behind the scenes at what's happening in the clinic. Hey guys, how you going? Lecky Mike Con here. Arvy's just on his way, so when he parachutes in, yes, just excuse him. He's screaming over from our performance center. Today's roundtable chat is on acute and or chronic conditions. So feel free to check out our blog posts. We have some information there. But where I'd like to kick off first is also welcome back Mike, who recently got married. So good to see his beautiful beard back in the chat today.
Thanks, mate.
So where I'd like to start is my personal perspective on this health spectrum and longevity. And there's 3 videos that I've recorded that you can check out on our socials, where I record on 3 chronic type conditions. So chronic inflammation, chronic stress, that's it, and chronic pain. So those 3 factors can really, there's the man parachuting right in now. So these 3 factors can present over time as developing chronic disease. And chronic disease can vary from person to person. It may be, a heart problem, could be brain issues, could be chronic inflammation issues, cascade and present as neurovascular conditions. I'm throwing a lot of big terms at you, but basically these things bubble over time and then it presents one day. So I think in order to treat chronic disease is one thing, but how about if we work on preventing chronic disease by addressing these 3 factors? What's your stress mechanisms? What are you doing today, currently, while you're pretty healthy to manage your stress? What are you doing for chronic or pain conditions? And what are you doing for inflammation? Okay, so before I pass the torch over, one thing that I'm doing right now that's a bit from left field is I practice ice baths. And it's a bit crazy. It's out there. It started with cold showers and then it's progressed to ice baths. What does it actually look like? I go to the bottle-o, I get 3 bags of ice, pop it into the bath. The kids are probably laughing and throwing ice cubes in my face. And then I just focus on some breathing and some techniques to get through the 3-minute ice bath. So that's a little challenge that I incorporate. So that's a chronic condition. I'd like to highlight the other end of the spectrum on acute conditions. And one thing that Con discussed was acute neck problems. So how about you share with us some of your thoughts about these acute neck problems, Con?
Yeah, sure. I tend to, when people come in with acute neck pain, I tend to see how much muscle spasm's there. So, for example, worst case scenario, towards one end of the spectrum, if someone's having a car accident, they usually come in with an extreme lot of pain, limited range of movement. So right then and there, we're not in a position to do manual therapy or give them any exercise. It's about pain relief. So I try and switch the muscles off. So what I find is very effective is to tape the upper traps to inhibit any sort of activation of those muscles. So inhibitory taping usually involves taping perpendicular or crossways to the muscle fibers. I find that extremely effective as a first port of call for people in trauma, for example, whether it's sport or car accidents. Then, as that muscle is switched off and we're not getting that sort of excessive compression of nerve fibers, I look to just do some gentle trigger therapy or soft tissue work to further relax the muscle. And I might progress with some gentle postural exercises. And as time goes on, that's when my manual therapy will slowly increase. But at the same time, I'm giving them postural exercises or progressing their postural exercises and discussing ergonomic factors, posture at work, what not to do so that they don't overload the upper thoracic muscle. There's a lot of muscles that go from the shoulder blades and the thoracic spine up into the neck. So I'm just trying to make sure that they're not overactivated and put under stress. And part of that involves, of course, scapular stabilization and retraining of the deep neck flexors, and starting that in neutral and gradually progressing to more functional related activity. At the same time, asking them, how we can better manage manual handling techniques or posture, the way they work at their workplace, and also social things that they're doing. So it's a three-pronged approach, really.
Great, I appreciate that, Con. So we've gone from ice baths to car accidents, and we've got Avi here who put together an awesome piece on low back pain. So that could meet us both ways in terms of something that, an acute back injury just happened this morning, or you've developed chronic back injuries. So did you want to chat a bit more about your piece that you put together, Avi?
Yeah, so I put a piece together pretty much pointing out some big points that you can do on helping the back pain, especially people that have had a back pain that's been ongoing for ages, as they label it as chronic low back pain. But the great Stuart McGill always states there's a cause for every injury, and that's the same with back pain. You just got to work out what causes the pain and what movements aggravate the pain, and just try and find movements that you can do that don't aggravate the pain. So I'll dive deeper into how you can find a couple of tests that you can do to find out those movements which are aggravators and which actually give you relief. Because when you keep bending in positions or keep doing movements that aggravate it, you actually just keep picking up the scab, and then you just keep injuring yourself, and it never gives the time to heal. And that's why they label it as chronic back pain, because you keep doing movements that aggravate it. So I'm guessing, Mike, have you ever had an injury?
I have had an injury before, long time ago when it comes to the basketball scene. It was more of a twisting injury. So moving forward, ball gets taken off me, instant turnaround. So you can imagine my knee dipping inwards, and we know what that can do to the knee. I didn't really investigate it too much. It was a lot when I was younger. So I just took the rest approach, took rest of basketball for a little while, and then tried to come back. I think it was 6 to 8 weeks later, and then felt the twinge again. Took a bit more time, and then when I came back a bit longer afterwards, things were fine. Since then, it's actually something I've been seeing in the clinic, which is that medial knee pain. I actually just saw one the other day, and it's interesting to note how structurally things can be pretty good when you're assessing it, but then when you look at the strength sides of things, even though it's an acute injury, it may stem from something that has occurred from a long time ago, whether it was, an injury further up or weakness further up that can then, lead into what's happening in the knee. So I find that quite interesting, like though it's quite something that's acute, it's happened just yesterday, it can stem from something that's happened quite a long time ago. So kind of sitting in that acute and chronic boat there.
That's an awesome tangent, because Avi and I are currently concurrently managing a work cover client, and he has an acute knee issue, right? But he's got a long-standing low back issue. So he's got like two bushfires happening at the same time, and he has this listing in the back. So listing means that you're sort of shunting to one side. Say your hips are straight up and down, but then your trunk and torso is twisted to the side. So this unfortunate fellow, he has a manual job working with horses in stables. So it's very manual type job, and he's tore the meniscus in his knee, the cartilage in his knee. Now that's primarily what we're treating him for, but his management is challenged even more so because he's got this shonky back. And so when we are working together at the Performance Center, we're strategizing a game plan where we don't want to overload the knee too much, because we also want to address this long-standing chronic back issue. So it's interesting having two heads. We both have, obviously we want to help old mate, but at the same time, we've got to make sure that Avi and I are aligned on the same strategy and the game plan. So at our Performance Center with all the equipment, so I thought that was interesting, and I was going to throw a curveball at Avi and ask him his thoughts on non-specific low back pain.
Yeah. That's a funny one, because I don't think everything has a cause. Learning from the best, Andrew Locke and Stuart McGill, so shout out to those guys. You just got to find out what caused that issue. So that comes back to that blog post that I written. And the reason I asked Mike that question was when he injured that knee, I'm guessing he avoided movements that cause pain, correct? And then the same goes with the back. Most of the time, with people that have back pain for a long time don't know those movements that cause pain. So they keep doing those movements, especially someone that's a flexion intolerant. They keep bending. And then every time they keep bending, it's actually aggravating their pain, but they don't know that. Whereas a knee injury or a shoulder injury, you sort of work out it's a lot easier, but the spine takes a lot more load throughout the day and it's a lot more stress. So that was the point. That's why I threw you under the bus there, Mike, but I just wanted to get that point across.
I actually had a question for you, right back at you. So you spoke a lot about, the chronic back pain and avoiding those movements that are aggravating you. For those people out there that have more acute episode and, they haven't really figured out what that movement is, what would you suggest they invest in?
That's a good question.
So, all right. So with those kind of people, it's a very similar approach. That you got to find out the cause. So that's why a good assessment early on and getting them through movement patterns, everyday movement patterns, to find out what's actually causing them pain, because they'll tell you straight away. Especially when it's more acute, it's easier to pick it up on what movements are aggravating it. They usually come in, I can't sit for too long, and straight away that's an aggravator. And so game plan would be very similar, just people who have had it a bit longer, it'll be more of a strengthening approach, whereas acute, you'd want to settle the symptoms first and then go down that pathway.
And, I know we're really talking about the acute presentations within a potentially chronic problem, because someone may, like to Mike's point, playing basketball, or the fellow that Avi and I are managing, most everyday people, you guys watching this at home, you probably have something that you notice is humming along. There's an irritation, and you kind of pay half attention to that thing, like, oh yeah, I was sitting in the home office, punching out the work for an hour, and then you feel that soreness when you get up. It's only when you go to do something like play with the dog or wrestle with the kids or shift some furniture around the house, then bang, that triggers an acute problem that may have been building up over a period of time. The challenges in 2020, we're seated, anchored in the home office a little bit longer. So you may find that the onset of postural pains for your headaches and neck pains, to what Con was talking about earlier, or seated for longer positions, you're in this forced, prolonged flex position, it may aggravate your symptoms even more so. So I think this is a perfect segue as we're coming down the finish line, to just keeping an eye on what the team are looking to do moving forward with our online sort of posting and strategy. Just to let you guys know, we've been committed to posting weekly on our own topics of interest. We're going to make a pivot shortly, and we'll be interested on your feedback as we put together like a bit more of a monster post, which has a lot of great information, all condensed and really easy to read, with lots of pictures and informative videos. So it's a challenge that the team's up for, in terms of the tough task to make it really interesting to read, but also very insightful. So we're looking forward to putting those pillar posts together. So we're going to go through one more quick round before we pull up stumps. And I'm going to ask Mike whether you're interested in considering cold showers. What are your thoughts?
Definitely. I would 100% consider that. I've actually done cold showers, but probably not for the reasons that you do them. Just more so on an extremely hot day. It's something I would just try to cool down the body. Something I would do back in the day, but more for recovery, 100%. I'd love to try ice baths and cold showers. I think there's definitely a lot of value in there.
Yeah, I know like some of our European cousins up in the Scandinavia, they do practice jumping into icy waters. I'm not sure if there's any Greek practices there, Con, with the Mediterranean Sea. I wouldn't mind taking a dip in there.
Yeah, I think there probably is, Leaky, but they usually have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine before doing that.
It is a blue zone. And Avi, you've got any plans for longevity and chronic inflammation? Any thoughts?
Actually do. Most of my food is based around the low FODMAP section. So Monash FODMAP, which created that diet, Monash University. So I try and eat most of my foods around the low, especially the vegetables that I consume, a lot of spinach, a lot of carrots, oranges and stuff. Oranges are fruit, but based around that kind of spectrum, just to sort of help with the inflammatory components in my gut.
Yeah, that's interesting because I don't want to open Pandora's box, but I do notice culturally a lot of like people of Indian background are vegetarian, and I wonder sometimes like how on low FODMAP a lot of like beans, lentils, dal. Do you have any thoughts on that with your evolving self-education with certain vegetarian meals and low FODMAP?
So the Indian diet's a big talking point. What I noticed, especially the vegetarians, are very difficult to hit the protein consumption.
Yeah.
And I notice they think like lentils and stuff. With the dal, you hit it, but you need a big amount to get it in. Yeah. And most of the time, they don't consume foods like soybeans or tofu, which have good quantity. So it can be a little bit of mission because most of the time I'm finding their protein intake's way low, and that's why recovery's not the same, bone issues. That's what I find.
Yeah, I noticed this may be a round table topic for next time, like nutrition. And obviously this isn't our primary certification, but it is an interest for each of us, not just as professionals, but personally, because we want to perform and feel energetic and live for a long, healthy life, So, I'd like to challenge us as the team to maybe come down into chatting about nutrition in a future roundtable. But for now, we won't open that Pandora's box. We'll pull up stumps here, guys. We appreciate your attention and look out for us in our March roundtable. And we'll see you guys. Stay well. Thank you, everyone. See you guys.